They were laughing right up until time stopped. One moment, the alien guards were howling with amusement, flicking foam at the human recruit strapped upside down to the ceiling of the barracks like some kind of primitive art installation. And then, in the space of a breath, they were frozen in mid-chortle, mouths open, claws mid-air, the sound of their mockery sliced clean from existence. Jonas Clay, the recruit in question, calmly unfastened himself from the ceiling as gravity seemed to remember its job. His feet touched the floor. His hand still held the sidearm, one none of them had seen before, one that technically didn't exist. Not in this universe. Jonas exhaled like a man who had just finished his coffee and noticed an insect in the last sip. That kind of disappointment. That kind of calm. He walked between the statues of his squadmates, Squad 89, the elite interspecies unit, supposedly the best of the best. 13 different species, all twice his size and 10 times more arrogant. They had been messing with him since the second he arrived, and he had taken it all with that same irritating smile. Until now. He looked up at Brack, the rhino-sized brute who'd been leading the hazing all week. The one who had just tried to rip open Jonas's locker like a tin can. Jonas sighed, tapped the sidearm dial, and time shuddered. With a sudden hump, everything resumed. Brack stumbled back from the locker, blinking in confusion as foam exploded from his own chest plate. The squad roared again, this time confused, less sure of their punchline. And Jonas? Jonas just walked away, holstering a weapon no one saw him draw. 2 hours earlier, the behemoth warship had hummed quietly as Jonas stepped off the shuttle that delivered him from Earth. The hangar was a cavern of metal and echo, filled with walking tanks that wore uniforms and had names. Some of them snorted at him before he even introduced himself. Being Earth's first recruit in the Galactic Federation military was not a glamorous position. To most of the other cadets, Earth was a footnote in the Galactic Index. A curiosity. A punchline. He was scanned, jabbed, poked, and tagged. The medical team spent longer trying to identify his organs than actually treating him. His translator was mistakenly set to speak fluent goat. That was apparently a joke. When he asked for coffee, someone handed him engine coolant as another joke. It smelled better than he expected. When he arrived at the barracks for Squad 89, the laughter started before the door even fully opened. "Oh look, they sent us a larva. Is it breakable? Should we wrap it in sponge? Someone feed it before it dies of evolution." Jonas stood at attention and gave the textbook salute. He looked like he belonged to an entirely different dimension. Which, technically, was not incorrect. "Jonas Clay," he said calmly. "Reporting for duty." The squad leader, a multi-eyed, tusk-faced brute named Devier, walked up and sniffed him. Literally sniffed him. "Why is it damp?" he muttered. "I was born like this," Jonas replied without missing a beat. They made him bunk next to the plasma reactor. Something about warmth and his cold-blooded nature. Another joke. They switched his bed with a gelatinous sleeping pod that hummed suggestively when he lay in it. He didn't complain. When they stuffed his boots with molecular glue, he just cut them off with a vibra knife and walked barefoot to the mess hall. When Brack slapped his tray from his hands and the synthetic food splattered across 3 species worth of uniforms, Jonas simply bowed, picked up his empty tray, and walked away. He never retaliated. He never shouted. He never even glared. Which is why, when he stopped time and walked out of that frozen room like a man leaving a boring meeting, every single alien felt a shiver in their skin, whatever kind of skin they had. The thing was, Jonas Clay had a secret. Not just the sidearm. Not just the way he seemed unaffected by things that should have broken him. Jonas had been chosen not for his strength, or his combat skills, or even his intelligence. He had been chosen because he was statistically the most average human alive. Average height, average reflexes, average emotional range. But that made him invisible to most threat detection systems in the galaxy. And it made him perfect for the artifact. It had been found beneath the ice in Antarctica, a device older than language, humming with possibilities. Everyone who touched it vanished or disintegrated. Jonas touched it and heard a voice say hello. The rest was redacted. Now he was here, surrounded by beings who thought his biggest weapon was a sarcastic smirk and an unfortunate haircut. That was just fine with him. Back in the present, the barracks buzzed with a different energy. No one mentioned the locker incident. No one mentioned how time had suddenly jumped, or how Jonas had been standing right behind them after being duct-taped to the ceiling 2 seconds earlier. The official version was training glitch. Jonas didn't say anything. He just unpacked his things, now in a properly assigned bunk far from the reactor, and sat on the edge of his bed. Devere walked by, slower than usual, casting sideways glances. Even Brack, who once threatened to use Jonas as a toothpick, gave him a wide berth. The sidearm wasn't visible. It never was. But they had all seen it. Felt it. That night, Jonas stared at the ceiling, listening to the various alien snores and hisses and gargles of sleeping squadmates. Somewhere in the ship, the central AI was still trying to register the energy signature of the weapon used in the barracks. It wouldn't find anything. The sidearm didn't belong in this reality. It slipped between the folds of what could be and what shouldn't. It wasn't a weapon you could design. It was a question with a trigger. As he closed his eyes, Jonas smirked to himself. They were going to have a very interesting training cycle. The rumor spread through the ship faster than any official transmission ever had. By the time the cafeteria opened the next morning, Jonas Clay was already a legend. Whispers followed him down every corridor. Some said he had frozen time using an Earth weapon that ran on black hole juice. Others claimed he was a prototype synthetic life form created by Earth's secret black labs. A few were convinced he had a second brain hidden somewhere in his chest, and that was how he could outthink everyone else. He didn't respond to any of it. He just ate his breakfast in silence, which, naturally, made him even more suspicious. No one trusted a man who didn't grumble about cafeteria food. General T-Char-GG called him in not long after. The general was not the kind of creature you wanted attention from. 8 feet tall, encased in natural exoskeleton armor, and equipped with pincers sharp enough to shear steel, T-Char-GG was the kind of officer whose presence made even the gruffest alien stand straighter. Jonas walked into the command chamber as if it were a Tuesday. T-Char-GG examined him through one of his compound eyes, tapping his desk with the tip of a claw. "You pulled a weapon during training," T-Char-GG said without preamble. His voice was a vibrating growl, like 2 rocks grinding in a cave. "I didn't shoot anyone," Jonas replied calmly. "Just made a point. No registered sidearm was listed in your induction. And we have no surveillance footage of the weapon. Must have been a glitch in your system," Jonas offered, then added helpfully, "Those happen sometimes." T-Char-GG leaned forward. "You are not authorized to carry temporal equipment. That's violation code 7 Alpha." Jonas smiled just a bit, not enough to be considered smug. "I'm not carrying anything, General." That technically was true. The sidearm didn't exist in normal space-time. It wasn't on him, around him, or even in a place that could be searched. It came when it was needed, like a very punctual ghost. T-Char-GG stared at him for a long moment, then flicked a claw across his console. "Your Earth file is incomplete. Large sections redacted. Psychological analysis says you're unremarkable, bordering on emotionally underdeveloped." "My high school crush would agree," Jonas said. T-Char-GG didn't laugh. He didn't even twitch. Instead, he dismissed Jonas with a gesture and said, "You will be watched." "I'd be disappointed if I weren't," Jonas replied, and walked out without looking back. Outside the command chamber, the air on the behemoth seemed thicker. Everyone was trying to be subtle while staring. Recruits pretended to check their data pads while sneaking glances. Maintenance bots slowed just a little too long when rolling past him. Jonas didn't care. He'd learned long ago that being underestimated was a gift. And in this place, everyone was too busy expecting lasers and claws to understand the power of patience. Later that afternoon, he sat in the barracks polishing a device that looked like an old radio antenna. It was actually a dampener tool meant to filter out telepathic interference, but Jonas used it as an excuse to look busy. Brack walked in, flanked by two of his usual goons. They stopped at Jonas's bunk but didn't speak right away. "You think you're clever, human," Brack said finally, voice thick with resentment. "I hope so." "I gave up being pretty," Jonas replied without looking up. "We know what you did. That wasn't Federation tech." "I think I sneezed," Jonas said. "Pretty sure it was just that." Brack leaned down, so close that his breath fogged the surface of the antenna. "You think you scared us. But you just proved you're dangerous. And dangerous things get removed." Jonas looked up, eyes calm. "Then you better bring more than an attitude next time." Brack flinched. Not because of the words, but because he felt something in that moment, just for a second. The weight of a presence. Like the world shifted. Like time had inhaled and was waiting to exhale. It passed in a blink, but it left a taste. He stepped back, grunted something under his breath, and left. That night, Jonas lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling again. His mind wandered back to Earth, or rather the facility below Earth's ice where he had been trained. Not in combat, not in strategy, not even in diplomacy. His training was in containment. He was taught how to survive something he never fully understood. The artifact they found beneath the polar ice didn't speak in words. It pulsed ideas. The first human to touch it was vaporized. The second aged 1,000 years in a second. Jonas was number 5. He didn't just survive the touch. He heard the thing inside whisper. "Hello, Jonah," it had said, even though his name was Jonas. No one ever figured out why. Maybe it got the name wrong. Maybe it knew something he didn't. Whatever the case, it merged with him. Not physically. Not like those alien parasite stories. It was more like he was tuned to it. And when it gave him the sidearm, it didn't hand him a weapon. It handed him a responsibility. A key. One that opened doors that should probably stay shut. That was why the locker was important. It was locked not just physically, but in layered time. Brack trying to force it open didn't just risk a prank gone wrong. It risked something waking up that wasn't supposed to. In the mess hall the next morning, the mood was quieter. Not respectful exactly, but cautious. Jonas got a full breakfast, no one interfered. Even the cooks seemed a bit more generous with portions. He sat alone. He preferred it that way. Until someone slid into the seat across from him. "You're Jonas," said the voice. It belonged to a four-armed, insectoid recruit named Vila. She was known for her intellect and her complete refusal to socialize. "I am," Jonas said. "You're hiding something," Vila said. "Technically everyone is," Jonas replied. "Even you. Like the fact you avoid sleeping in dorms because you hum in your sleep and it makes the walls vibrate." Vila blinked her wide, glassy eyes. "How do you know that?" "I read fast," Jonas said with a shrug. She stared at him, as if trying to decide whether to report him or recruit him. Then she placed a small device on the table. It was a signal blocker. Nothing they said would be recorded. "You're going to need allies," she said. "The Federation doesn't like anomalies. Especially not ones they can't control." He paused. "Are you offering?" "I'm offering curiosity. And maybe survival." "Yours. That's generous." "No. It's selfish. You break the ship, I go with it." Jonas smiled. "Then let's both hope I hold it together." As Vila walked away, Jonas looked down at his tray. The food hadn't moved. The sidearm hadn't appeared. But somewhere, in some pocket of overlapping time, he could feel it. Watching. Waiting. Ready. This place wasn't ready for what was coming. He wasn't even sure he was. But he'd made a promise the day he touched that artifact. If he ever had to choose between saving himself or protecting what lay beyond that door, he would do what was necessary. Even if it meant becoming exactly what they feared. Jonas stood at the edge of the hangar deck, staring out into the black void beyond the containment shield. The Void Trial was a once-a-year event, designed to push every squad past their limits. It wasn't a simulation like most believed. It was a real mission set in a region of wild space riddled with debris, gravitational anomalies, and unpredictable hostiles left behind by a long-dead civilization. The objective was simple on paper: retrieve a beacon placed at the center of the asteroid field and survive for 12 hours under live conditions. But no one ever completed it without losses. Some squads came back with missing limbs. Others never came back at all. Squad 89 stood behind Jonas, more subdued than usual. Ever since the incident with the locker and the strange weapon that no one could explain, they had approached him with a strange mix of caution and reluctant respect. Even Birak, whose idea of conflict resolution usually involved punching things until they stopped existing, kept his snide remarks to a minimum. Jonas knew they still didn't like him, not really. But now they watched him closely, like scientists observing a new species that might be poisonous. The drop ship vibrated beneath their boots as it powered up. Jonas slid into a seat beside Vila, who was already typing code into her interface pad, preparing her drone system for deployment. She glanced at him briefly. "Try not to do anything reality-breaking this time," she muttered. "I'll do my best," Jonas replied. No promises. The flight to the asteroid field was uneventful, though the silence inside the ship was heavier than usual. No one joked. No one boasted. It felt like the beginning of something they didn't understand. When they arrived, the landscape beyond the viewport looked like chaos given physical form. Asteroids the size of buildings spun in impossible patterns. Stray plasma storms lit the shadows with purple lightning. Gravitational surges twisted space in pulses. Somewhere deep inside that maelstrom, the beacon waited. Once they landed on a small, stable fragment, the team fanned out. Jonas took point, navigating with an old-fashioned compass module rather than relying entirely on Federation scanners. He didn't trust the tech in places like this. Places that bent the rules. The first 2 hours were manageable. The squad moved through floating clusters of debris, avoiding gravitational rifts and scanning for movement. Then the pirates arrived. They weren't the usual kind. These were artificial constructs, remnants of a civilization that had once weaponized intelligence itself. Their ships were angular, jagged things that shimmered like mirages. Their crew appeared humanoid but flickered, as if reality itself was uncertain about their existence. They didn't speak. They just attacked. Squad 89 reacted fast, forming a defensive triangle. Plasma fire lit the space between rocks. One of the recruits, a four-legged beast named Kroll, took a hit to the side and went down hard. Jonas knelt beside him, assessed the damage, and pulled out the sidearm. He didn't activate it. Not yet. Instead, he used its interface to stabilize Kroll's biosigns temporarily. Vila covered him, launching a pair of drones that exploded mid-air, releasing magnetic pulses that disoriented the attackers. Birak, to his credit, charged into the fray with the kind of raw force that broke energy shields. The battle was brutal, fast, and confusing. But they survived it. Barely. "We need to get to the beacon now," Vila said, helping Kroll back to his feet. "The longer we stay, the worse this gets." Jonas checked his compass. The signal was stronger now. They were close. But the gravitational anomalies were becoming more unstable. He could feel the shifts in his bones. They moved quickly, climbing over debris, crossing narrow metallic bridges that groaned under their weight. And then it happened. The team reached a wide gap between two shattered structures, and the only way forward was a jump. They prepped for it, launched one by one, until only Jonas and Birak remained. As Jonas prepared to leap, Birak moved suddenly, slamming a fist into his back. Jonas went tumbling into space, spinning out of control. The last thing he saw was Birak's satisfied grin as he activated a beacon to signal the others that Jonas had been lost. But Jonas didn't die. Not even close. He tumbled into a gravity well, and instead of being torn apart, he was pulled into a pocket of folded time. The space around him froze, reshaped, and whispered. He found himself floating inside a fragment of what had once been a planet, now locked in temporal stasis. And at the center of this hollow sphere, a version of himself stood watching him. "Hello again," Jonas said to himself. The copy nodded. This was not the first loop. Not the first betrayal. The Sidearm had brought him here before, in other timelines, in other fractures. Each time something slightly different. Each time he survived. Why are you showing me this now? Jonas asked. Because you need to remember. You think you're the anomaly, but you are the constant. The vision faded. Jonas reached out and triggered the sidearm. It folded the space around him like pages in a book, and he stepped through the tear. He reappeared 10 meters behind his squad, just as they were preparing to extract the beacon. Vila spotted him first, eyes wide. How? She started to ask, but he raised a hand. Later. He turned to Birak. The larger alien tensed, expecting retribution. Jonas said nothing. Instead, he walked past him to the beacon, tapped the sidearm once against its surface, and triggered a surge that stabilized the surrounding space for 10 seconds. Just long enough for the team to grab the beacon and retreat. They made it back to the drop ship with seconds to spare as another gravitational collapse consumed part of the asteroid field. As the ship lifted off, the team sat in stunned silence. No one asked Jonas what had happened. No one spoke of the betrayal. But they all looked at him differently now. Not with fear, not entirely. But with understanding. Later, when they were debriefed, and the I system struggled to explain the disruption in the simulation logs, Jonas sat quietly, sipping from a metal cup that held something barely resembling coffee. Vila sat beside him. Birak tried to kill you, she said softly. Yes, Jonas replied. You're not going to report him. No. Why not? Because next time, he won't hesitate to follow orders. He knows what I am now. What are you, Jonas? He looked at her. Something the universe didn't plan for. And something it might need. She stared at him, then nodded once, accepting an answer that answered nothing. Jonas leaned back, watching the stars crawl across the viewport. He had survived the Void trial. He had survived betrayal. And he had remembered something important. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about preparation. Something was coming. And this was just the beginning. The arrival of Inspector Kor was not announced with trumpets or alarms, but with silence. The kind of silence that soaked into the walls and made people speak in half-whispers for reasons they couldn't explain. 1 minute the galactic warship Behemoth was running its usual routine of chaos and confusion, and the next, systems recalibrated without notice, doors unlocked and locked themselves with no command, and the internal temperature dropped by 2 degrees. Everyone knew what it meant. The Core Federation had sent one of their own. Not a soldier. Not a diplomat. An inspector. And not just any inspector but Core, the most feared among them. A being older than some recorded star systems, composed not of matter but of energy braided into thought, Core did not investigate routine breaches. Core was sent when the rules were bent in ways that could unravel foundations. And something about Jonas Clay had drawn their attention. Jonas was summoned without ceremony. A flat-toned announcement through the intercom. Report to Chamber Delta 12. No explanation. No escort. Just his name and a door. He left his bunk slowly, not because he was hesitant, but because he was thinking. He had expected this. The Federation may have been slow, but it wasn't stupid. The sidearm alone was enough to raise alarms, even if no one could explain how it had worked. And now, it seemed, someone with authority wanted answers. He wasn't worried. Not yet. Chamber Delta 12 was deep within the ship, in a sector rarely used. When he entered, the lights dimmed and then shifted through colors like someone testing the limits of his perception. At the center of the room was a floating sphere of light and shadow, constantly reshaping itself like it was arguing with itself about what it should look like. That was Core. No eyes, no mouth, no limbs. Just presence. Jonas Clay, the voice said, but it wasn't a sound. It was a vibration in his bones. Present, Jonas replied, stepping closer without flinching. You are in violation of multiple protocol layers. You possess technology not recognized by this dimension's current hierarchy. You access time-state manipulation without authorization. You refuse to report the anomaly. You forgot I made the coffee machine work again, Jonas said casually. Silence followed. For a moment, he thought Kor had frozen. Then the sphere pulsed once, and the voice returned. You do not fear judgment. I don't fear things that don't understand me, Jonas replied. Then let us understand you, Kor said, and before he could react, the chamber vanished. He was falling. Or floating. It was hard to tell. All at once, memories began unfolding in front of him. Not as images, but as experiences. His first time touching the artifact. The cold. The soundless scream of reality bending inward. The moment the sidearm had appeared in his palm. The whisper of a voice that sounded both like him, and not like him. The pain that followed. The absence that came after. And then the rebuilding. The long, careful training beneath the ice, where he was taught to control what he had no language for. He relived it all, but more than that, Kor relived it with him. This device is not of your world, Kor stated. It chose me, Jonas said. It is older than your concept of time. Then maybe it's time to rethink how we measure time. You are not equipped to contain what it holds. No one is. That is the point. Kor paused, as if recalibrating 1,000 algorithms at once. You have modified no laws. You have violated none with conscious intent. Your actions, while disruptive, are not malicious. That's about the nicest thing anyone's said to me since I got here, Jonas said. The chamber reassembled around them, and the presence of Kor dimmed, condensing slightly. What are you, Jonas Clay? Someone trying to make sure we don't open doors we can't close. And the sidearm? A lockpick. A warning. A tool. I still haven't figured out which. There are others who would destroy you to gain it. Then they better move fast. Kor pulsed again. I will not report your existence. I will not erase you. I will authorize level 8 clearance under conditional observation. But understand this, Jonas Clay, there are things that see your light now. Things that do not blink. Jonas nodded. I've always been good at being overlooked. Let's hope that lasts a bit longer. With no further words, Kor vanished. Not in a beam or a blink, but in a quiet exhale of energy. Jonas stood alone again in the chamber, his skin tingling, the weight of memory settling back into place. He knew he should feel relieved. Instead, he felt watched. When he returned to the upper decks, the atmosphere on the behemoth had shifted again. Rumors of Kor's presence had spread, and the crew looked at Jonas with renewed curiosity. No one asked him what had happened in that chamber. No one needed to. The fact that he was walking freely again said more than any report could. Vila found him in the observation wing, where the stars streamed past in silent rivers. She stood beside him without greeting. They didn't erase you, she said. Not this time, Jonas replied. That means they think you're useful. Or dangerous. Hopefully both. She was silent for a moment, then said, I saw what you did during the Void trial. You phased through folded time. That's not something you learn in combat school. It's something you survive, Jonas said. You're not just a recruit. Neither are you, Jonas replied, and for a moment she looked surprised. But only for a moment. They stood there a while, the only sound the gentle hum of the ship, until Vila spoke again. If what you carry draws attention, you won't be able to fight it alone. I don't plan to, Jonas said. But I won't put others in the crossfire unless they choose to stand there. She nodded once. Then consider me chosen. Jonas smiled slightly. One ally was more than he had expected. That night, back in his bunk, he dreamed of the artifact again. Of the infinite doors it had shown him. Some led to peace. Others to fire. All of them led to change. And in every dream, one constant remained. The sidearm waited in his hand, humming softly, ready to become whatever he needed it to be. A key. A sword. A final word. He didn't know what came next. But he knew the universe was watching. And somewhere in the dark, something else had started watching too. The mission was marked as routine, which was the first clue it wasn't. On the behemoth, the word routine was usually Federation code for expendable or politically inconvenient. Jonas read the mission brief 3 times, not because it was complicated, but because it was suspiciously simple. A lost Federation probe had gone silent beyond the border of controlled space. Squad 89 had been chosen to retrieve it. No backup, no escort, no official oversight. The coordinates sat just outside a gravity-neutral corridor known for pirate activity and ancient wreckage, far from patrol lanes. Jonas didn't say anything as they prepped. He watched his squad go through the motions with practiced precision, but there was tension under their movements, like animals sensing a storm no one could see yet. Birak stayed quiet, which was almost more unsettling than his usual posturing. Vila was hyper-focused, calibrating her drone systems twice, something she never did. Kroll had stopped humming, and even Devor, who usually had a comment for every situation, kept his mouth shut. Jonas knew he wasn't the only one who smelled the trap, but no one was speaking it aloud. That was the unspoken code in this place. Suspicion didn't stop orders. Only proof did, and by the time you had proof, it was usually too late. They boarded the drop ship and launched into the dark. The journey was smooth for the first few minutes. No turbulence, no signal disruptions. The silence of space stretched around them like a waiting mouth. When they entered the coordinates, the proximity alarms lit up almost immediately. Not from natural obstacles. From ships. Cloaked ones? Dozens. They appeared around the probe like scavengers pretending to be stars, each of them modified with non-standard weapons and hulls that shimmered unnaturally, as if phase shifted. These were not pirates. They were hunters. And they were expecting them. The trap triggered before they could respond. Ion pulses slammed into the ship's engines, killing propulsion. Shields held barely. Vila deployed the drones on reflex, and Birak let out a low growl as he braced himself against the bulkhead. Jonas didn't reach for a console. He reached inward, felt the familiar hum, and let the sidearm slip into his palm like a memory returning to its owner. "They're jamming comms," Vila snapped. "No outgoing signal. We're boxed in." Jonas nodded. "We're not meant to win this fight. We're meant to vanish quietly." "Then they chose the wrong squad," Birak snarled, eyes glowing with the thrill of a proper fight. Jonas stepped forward, sidearm pulsing gently. The ship's floor shivered. The lights flickered. Then, without warning, Jonas triggered the sidearm's tertiary function. Time fractured. Reality split into 3 overlapping moments. In one, the ship exploded. In another, they surrendered and were taken. In the third, Jonas saw something he wasn't meant to see: General Thrgg, standing aboard one of the enemy's ships, speaking calmly with a hooded figure. The sidearm registered it, timestamped it, then collapsed the fractals back into a single thread. "We have a traitor," Jonas said aloud, eyes burning. "General Thrgg sold us out." The squad stared at him, disbelief shadowed by the sound of more ships closing in. "He's giving Earth to them," Jonas continued. "A deal. Immunity for betrayal. We're collateral." "How do you know?" Devor asked, his voice unusually low. "Because I've already seen it," Jonas replied. "Then what do we do?" Vila asked, moving closer, eyes darting between him and the growing enemy signature. "We steal one of their ships," Jonas said. "And we show them what happens when you corner the wrong anomaly." The words had barely left his mouth before the sidearm shifted shape, expanding into a field that shimmered around his arm like a living gauntlet. He pointed it toward the ship's hull, fired once, and the metal folded open with surgical precision. They leapt into space, tethered only by magnetic boots and sheer desperation. The nearest enemy ship was 10 meters away, a scout-class vessel drifting just close enough. Jonas led the charge, disabling its outer sensors with a focused pulse. Birak tore open the side hatch with his bare hands, and the team poured inside. The crew inside never stood a chance. Whatever species they weren't expecting resistance this organized, this fast, or this angry. Jonas accessed the controls, overriding the alien language through the sidearm's interface. The ship turned with a violent jerk, and within seconds, they were navigating away from the kill zone. Behind them, the other enemy ships began pursuit, but not fast enough. Jonas rerouted power, dumped false signals, and triggered a feedback loop that bought them 60 seconds of cover. "We're not out of this yet," Vila said, monitoring the rear sensors. "They'll track us again soon." "They won't have to," Jonas replied. "Because we're going straight to the source." "You mean him?" Birak asked. "No need to name the traitor." Jonas nodded. "If THRGG wants to sell Earth, then we'll crash the auction." Within hours, they had bypassed standard routes, jumped through illegal wormholes, and arrived at a hidden relay station orbiting a gas giant. Federation signature. Shielded. And on every channel, they found confirmation. THRGG was transmitting secure messages to an unidentified faction, offering Earth's coordinates, Federation military codes, and clearance maps. The betrayal was not subtle. It was desperate and sloppy. "What do we do now?" Devor asked. "We send the evidence," Vila said. "No," Jonas corrected. "We deliver it." And so they did. They entered the relay station, guns drawn, sidearm ready. THRGG was there, just as Jonas had seen him, flanked by mercenary guards and representatives of the faction, who vanished the moment they were discovered. Cowards. Runners. Jonas walked straight up to THRGG and held up the sidearm. "You picked the wrong timeline, General." THRGG laughed. "You think the Federation will listen to a half-trained Earthling with a toy?" "No," Jonas said. "I think they'll listen to your own voice." And he activated the sidearm's record function, projecting the conversation from the enemy ship. Every word. Every promise of betrayal. The mercenaries hesitated. Then one raised a weapon. And everything happened at once. Jonas fractured time again, moved between seconds, disarmed 2 enemies, shot another in the leg, and reset the room before anyone else had blinked. THRGG was on the floor, pinned by Birak and roaring with outrage. "You're done," Jonas said. The evidence was delivered. The betrayal confirmed. THRGG was stripped of rank, command, and dignity. Earth was secured, at least for now. Back aboard the behemoth, the squad sat in the mess hall, eating in silence. Then Devor raised a cup. "To the kid who bent time, punched betrayal in the face, and still drinks that awful sludge they call coffee." They all raised their cups. Even Birak. Jonas smiled faintly. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, he wasn't just surviving it. He was shaping it. Ask ChatGPT. The hallway lights pulsed soft blue as Jonas walked the long stretch toward Command Deck 0. The air on the behemoth felt different now. The tension that used to follow him like static had been replaced by a quieter energy, the kind that filled a room when people started realizing their assumptions had been wrong. Jonas Clay, once mocked as Earth's scrawniest offering to the Galactic Federation, had become something else entirely. Not a hero, not a weapon, not even a mystery anymore. He had become a variable. And in systems built to control outcomes, variables were dangerous. He stepped into the circular command chamber without slowing. High Command was gathered in full for the first time since the warship's launch. Holograms hovered above the round table, displaying sectors, security reports, and threat maps. The faces around the table came from every corner of the galaxy, beings with minds older than Jonas could grasp, all of them watching him now with the same expression. Not fear, not distrust, but calculation. He recognized it instantly. It was the look people wore when trying to decide if someone was a resource or a risk. He didn't wait to be addressed. You wanted answers. You got them. THRGG betrayed the Federation. Earth is secure. The mission is complete. Admiral Yera, a translucent being who floated slightly above her seat, nodded slowly. And yet here you are, Mr. Clay, a cadet with access to technology that predates our civilization. A cadet who bends timelines and reprograms physics without blinking. You're not just a soldier. You're something else. I never claimed I wasn't, Jonas replied. Then why serve? Another commander asked. Why follow orders at all when you could override the chain of command at will? Because someone needs to, Jonas said. And because if I don't, someone worse will. Yera exchanged a look with her colleagues. Then she leaned forward. We are offering you a command of your own. A new division. Unlisted. Unrestricted. Special operations, cross-dimensional clearance. You will answer directly to no one. Jonas stared at her, then shook his head. I'm not done learning yet. You're beyond the curriculum, another voice argued. That's exactly why I need to stay in it, Jonas said. I don't want to skip steps. I want to know what I'm trying to protect. They stared at him again, this time not with suspicion, but something closer to reluctant respect. You'll be granted shadow status, Yara finally said. Your presence will be classified. But you will continue to train. And you will be watched. I'd expect nothing less, Jonas said. Then he turned and walked out. Word of the offer spread despite how secret it was meant to be. Someone always talked. By the time Jonas returned to the barracks, Squad 89 had already transformed the place into something resembling a celebration. A broken training drone had been repurposed into a mock trophy, painted with Jonas's face and an oversized sidearm duct taped to its side. Streamers made of ration wrappers hung from the ceiling, and someone had hacked the intercom to play distorted earth jazz at a questionable volume. Jonas stepped inside and was immediately met with a half-hearted chant. All hail the time freak, Devor shouted, holding up a cup. To the reality hacker, Vila added. To the guy who didn't rat me out when I nearly killed him, Birak muttered. Jonas accepted the mock trophy with a straight face. You all realize this violates at least 17 regulations. That's the spirit, Vila grinned. The laughter that followed wasn't forced. It wasn't mockery. It was real, rough around the edges, but real. For the first time, Squad 89 wasn't tolerating him. They had accepted him. And maybe, somewhere deep down, they even trusted him. Later that night, when the barracks had quieted and the others had drifted off to their bunks, Jonas sat alone at his locker. The old one? The one Birak had once tried to open. It hadn't been touched since. Now, as he stared at it, the lock disengaged with a quiet hiss. Slowly, carefully, the door creaked open. Inside, nestled between a folded uniform and a small, unmarked black box, was another sidearm. Not a replica. Not a backup. A second one. Sleeker, humming with unfamiliar energy, its form flickering between solid and translucent. Unlike the first, this one had a message etched into the inner grip, not in any known language, but Jonas understood it instantly. The multiverse is watching. He stared at it for a long time, fingers brushing the grip without touching it fully. He could feel its purpose. This wasn't a weapon. It was a key to something bigger. Something waiting. Behind him, the barracks was silent. No alarms. No warnings. Just the low thrum of the behemoth as it cruised through space. Jonas closed the locker gently and leaned back on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. Things were changing. He could feel it. The Federation thought the enemy was on the outside, lurking in the dark corners of space. But Jonas had seen enough to know better. The real danger was in the cracks between things, in the spaces no one paid attention to. It wasn't just about politics or borders or betrayal. It was about reality itself. And the pieces that no longer fit. The dreams came again. Not like before, not just fragments of memory. This time, he stood in a room made of mirrors. Each reflection showed a different version of him. Some were heroes, others monsters. One was crying. One was laughing with madness in his eyes. One held the world in his hand. One burned it. The new sidearm appeared in his grip during the dream, heavier than the first, more deliberate. A voice echoed, not human, not machine, just present. You are not chosen because you are strong. You are chosen because you are consistent. Because you are stubborn enough to not become them. Jonas woke without moving, the words lingering in his head. He didn't know who had made the sidearms, or what the artifact in Antarctica truly was. But he was beginning to understand why it had called to him. He was an anchor. In a universe that could fracture and splinter, someone had to hold the thread. The next morning, he stood on the observation deck, watching stars drift past like dust on an endless river. Vila joined him, sipping from a metal cup. Another weapon, she said quietly. In your locker. He didn't ask how she knew. She always knew. Yes, he answered. What will you do with it? Keep it closed, Jonas said. Until the day I can't. She nodded, her expression unreadable. Then they stood together, saying nothing, watching the stars move. Jonas Clay, Earth's smallest recruit, the boy who had been duct-taped to the ceiling and laughed at by warriors twice his size, had changed the trajectory of an empire. Not with rage. Not with brute strength. But with patience. With timing. With the impossible. He didn't know where the path would lead next. But he would be ready. They teased the Earthling for being small. Now they were rewriting the training manual in his name. Ask ChatGPT?